Which company was trying to buy Figma? Adobe. And so Adobe's been in the news, and they're in the news for a negative reason. The community's in an uproar because Adobe's terms and conditions, basically in their terms and conditions that they try to sneak in, is that their AI can be trained on all the data models that customers are using. Obviously, if you're creating something and they're able to use that to generate other people's AI, that's the IP that's, very unethical to steal from.
The more real our experiences, our conversations are with these sort of AI assistants or these large language models, the more we believe that what we're getting back is a real response. Just like if you're speaking to someone, you believe what they're saying, and it's all in that exchange. And I think to get to the ultimate product, things like sarcasm have to be factored in, because if you drop something that's sarcastic and you get a response that someone really doesn't understand, then suddenly that illusion is broken as well.
Because even with GPT-4o, I still feel it's not as good as GPT-4, just the base model is. I feel it's, trying to come up with answers as best as it can, even if it makes stuff up way more than GPT-4 base did. It's just trying a bit too hard to just output something rather than saying, I'm not too sure, I don't know, or, try something else. It's just trying to look impressive, but not really being that accurate.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Make an Impact with your host, Makoto Kern. And I've got Joe and Brynley as well again. How's it going, guys?
Good to be back. Ready for the next one.
Today's topic, we'll probably discuss the latest news as far as AI is concerned, and then we'll go through some other latest and greatest things that are happening out there. But I think to first kick it off, what's been in the news is the Figma release. As UX designers, we're always looking and seeing what's happening with the tools. And Figma just had a config last week in San Francisco, and they had a whole new set of features related to AI. And that's everything from generating mobile AI kind of prototyping. They also had where it can actually put together prototypes automatically for you, stitch them together, which is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Automatic naming of layers, which is, that's a big time suck for us. And then I think they also had more of the Figma slides. I don't think that's really as automated, but that's something that is probably like a more shiny object type of thing. That's, this is a cool thing to add if instead of using, Google Slides or PowerPoint type of thing. But yeah, not sure if
I haven't really been following the Figma updates, but was anything around kind of creativity, or was it more around automation and assistance? Like that's where I'm fascinated about, is where they can actually push the line in creative processes.
I think it was more around just making the design efficient. I'm still curious because they haven't released everything yet to the general public. They just showed what that looks like. So I'm curious as to, when you're actually building, when you're building templates, that's pretty easy. Like, this is a login page, or this is a form page. I think some of that is still, kind of up for grabs as far as how creatively it's going to create something. It's probably more wireframey. And so I'd be curious as to how that's going to evolve. I mean, it's obviously a first step, but I think, with the auto layouts and things like that are, I think, a little bit more of a, it takes a lot of time to do and to do it right. That's where it's going to help us spend more time on the creative side and less time on the admin side. So I think that's really where it's at.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge help. I think that's always go for it, Joe.
I was going to ask, what are the interfaces like? Is it where you're actually like typing in, like with ChatGPT, and sort of asking it to do things and it generates from there? Or is it you're actually interacting with Figma? Yeah,
you're interacting a little bit more with Figma. Some of it's just like a one-touch button type of thing. Some of it's more you're typing and prompting it to do something. But again, they just showed snippets of it versus it's not released yet into Figma. So I'd be curious how the actual release is going to look like and how that evolves.
I always sort of admired Figma in the way it's right from the beginning. It's just been pushing an amazing tool. So it was always intuitive to work with. So it'd be interesting to see if they can extend that same intuitive sort of interface into AI.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting to see.
And I think that's a good jump into which company was trying to buy Figma? Adobe. And so Adobe's been in the news. And they're in the news for a negative reason. And it's probably a good thing that that sales did not happen with Figma because of Adobe's terms and conditions. And that's been a pretty big, the community's in an uproar because basically in their terms and conditions that they try to sneak in is that their AI can be trained on all the data models that customers are using. And it's not something that, obviously, if you're creating something and they're able to use that to generate other people's AI, that's the IP that's, very unethical to steal from.
Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
With Figma, they don't do that, and they said if they will, they'll explicitly tell you that that's going to happen. So that's that's just another.
It's interesting. Yeah. It's a general problem space around AI because it's almost like a layer of abstraction between the data that it's being trained on and actual output, what it looks like. It's not like you're taking someone's proprietary code and then copying it into some other repository or making it available. It's not very clear like that. You can't easily tell if you're talking to a language model and it's giving you answers, or this is how this code looks, or this is what this Figma design looks like. You can't tell where it actually got that from. So it'll make sort of mild, subtle adjustments to it. It's not a carbon copy of where it copied it from originally. So it can be very hard then to pinpoint, okay, is this actually, our proprietary, models or data or information it's using, or did it just generate it itself? And even with OpenAI in general, like ChatGPT, it's been pulled from so many sources, but it's hard for someone to go, okay, that's a really good answer it came up with, but, that's very similar to a blog post I wrote like 3 years ago. Did it pull from that? Who knows? It's similar. It has similar talking points, but yeah, very hard to tell. So yeah, it's a problem space in general. And it's interesting to see, I think as people become more aware of that and more aware of how their data can be used to train models, that they're going to become a little bit more sensitive to how it's being used going forward. And as you said, like when Adobe changes their terms and conditions, previously, okay, sure, but now it's, everyone's watching that sort of thing way more closely. Because it's just so much easier to sort of pull that data out and use it now than it was before.
Yeah. So I think the third topic I want to discuss is obviously Claude's Sonnet release by Anthropic. Some of their it's funny. I almost compare it to when Apple releases their iPhone and then Google releases theirs, and they're always trying to one up each other. So
exactly.
Claude is one-upping GPT-4 in the test benchmarks, and so we'll see what the 5.0 of ChatGPT will be better.
Yeah,
hopefully it's not a new camera.
I'm always.
It does feel like a sort of arms race of AI, and I think Mark Zuckerberg was getting stuck in recently. He's like, oh, you guys are, without your closed off models are trying to create God. And, it is just, as you say, it's like always the sort of benchmarks that have been pushed, which is great. I mean, competition drives innovation.
Yeah.
So, things are going to be, keep being pushed. But what's interesting about the kind of Claude 3.5 Sonnet is, some of the benchmarks that they are using, which I was unaware of, things like the undergraduate level knowledge. It's MMLU, which is massive multitask language understanding. So that's one way that they help models, I guess, get context and understanding. Then there's the graduate level reasoning as well, or the GPQA, which is an interesting kind of graduate level Google proof Q&A. So a whole lot of experts have sort of put this system together of, I believe it's almost handwritten notes, I stand to be corrected, on different, very difficult academic subjects that it has to then, they use that as something to base the sort of reasoning on, opposed to facts that you can just pull and verbatim sort of quote those. And then the last one about it is the coding proficiency, or the human eval, which is apparently a data set of about 164. I think that's probably the handwritten programming notes or problems. And that sort of is used to measure the functional correctness of code that these large language models generate. So it's interesting, all the benchmarks that they're kind of using to actually get different measurements of the functional areas of these large language models.
It's interesting where Claude, from my understanding, and hopefully I'm not missing something, but it does not go out and pull from real time like websites. You have to upload that data still. ChatGPT-4 will go out and do that. Claude will stop you and say, I don't have access to go out and do that. So it's interesting because I've tried to do financial investment type of, analytics for either one of those, where it's analyzing, a stock picks or crypto or whatever it is for the last year or last 6 months, because things vary so much based on the news and things like that versus 2 years ago. So that's where Claude will say, well, I only have records up to this, this year, which is I think 2 years ago. But ChatGPT will go out and actually scan a lot of things and then analyze it, which I think is far more superior potentially if they're accurate.
Yeah. I wonder what the reason is for that.
I think that's a really good point, because again, the benchmarks that they sort of show and demonstrate, the capabilities, I'm always like skeptical of those benchmarks, because it seems again like very academic, like they're asking very specific, as you say, like graduate level questions or specific scientific questions, expecting specific answers coming back, which is all good and well. But if you train your model very specifically to try and target those benchmark kind of questions, you can kind of fudge the numbers a bit, I feel. It's very easy to do that. So I'd be more interested in more practical tests around those sort of questions. Around those benchmarks, like actual real use. Because even with GPT-4o, this is obviously completely anecdotal, but I still feel it's not as good as GPT-4, just the base model is, just my own personal use with it. I feel it's, trying to come up with answers as best as it can, even if it makes stuff up way more than GPT-4 base did. And it's just trying a bit too hard to just output something rather than saying, I'm not too sure, I don't know, or, try something else, or, I need more information to answer this for you properly. It's just trying to look impressive, but not really being that accurate. So I would be interested to see if, some tests come out that are a bit more sort of practical based. And then, as also Makoto was saying, when we're comparing these models, there's a bit more to them than just the model itself. Like, sure, okay, let's say we did come up with some metrics and we can see one model's a lot better at generating than the other. But what about the tools and the actual company itself? I mean, with OpenAI, you have all the image capabilities baked right in. As Makoto said, the Bing search will go out and pull information in, has the data analytics inside it, allows you to upload documents really easily to it, has all these other tools, make it way more user-friendly. And also from a developer standpoint, like the APIs are really easy to integrate with, to set up accounts, to set up billing. And so I think when you're looking at sort of determining, or should we switch to another model or not, I think it's definitely a lot more connotations and just pure answers that are coming back. It's like you kind of have to look at their entire suite of products. And what OpenAI isn't just, the ChatGPT model. It's really all the tools and services they're building out around that really makes it a powerful sort of solution to go with. Yeah, I think there's always quite a bit more to consider there than just looking at the models themselves. Again, it always depends on your use case, but at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot more negative type of articles around it's a bubble. It's not really AI as you think it is. There's just what you're saying maybe is around some of that testing. So I'm curious where some of this, obviously negative articles can be more clickbaity, but I'm just curious as to, what are they, where is the focus going to be next? Is it just continuously improving on those algorithms or models? Is it addressing a specific area of, is it visual, like that visual reasoning? Is it more of the analytical side of things? Is it more deciphering, the data that's out there?
Well, I think multimodal is definitely kind of, I think, where it's going, just having vision, sound, text, all that reasoning. I mean, just everything. I was just thinking, I don't know whether you saw the headlines of the new AirPods. I think they're thinking of putting cameras in them.
Oh, really?
I know.
Do you think? I mean,
that's not good.
That's really just where they're obviously just going to try and kit out everything that's possible to get
data,
visual information, because it's so important. And I kind of wanted to touch, maybe that's a good transition into what I wanted to chat about. If Makoto, you finished on that.
Let's do it.
But AI and sarcasm, just because we're talking about large language models so much, but it's interesting just to understand the intricacies of kind of language, and especially that, the models are mostly text-based at the moment, and how much goes into actually helping them understand things like sarcasm. So we're talking about Claude, 3.5 Sonnet, and how that's sort of trying to one up ChatGPT 4.0, and they're obviously both really good large language models, and Claude saying it's sort of demonstrating enhanced capabilities and understanding things, specifically like nuance, humor, complex instructions, and also sort of excelling at producing this high quality content with a more natural tone. And it's all really about this tone and being natural, I guess, and coming across as natural and believable. And so sort of closer to home, I think, on IiMPACT's projects that we're working on, one specific client we've been working with to really help personify their AI experience, their AI assistant, to really sort of tweak the prompts, or using prompt engineering to really guide its reactions, and trying to keep it following a brand voice, so to speak. And I think just in that process, you sort of take for granted what cultural nuance there is in language as well. How tone is used and how important context is. I mean, we're talking about visual, like, I'm watching both of you because we're used to kind of visual cues when we converse. So when you just have text, it makes it really difficult to understand some of those really sort of subtle cues that you're picking up. And if you're conversing with an AI, and obviously the more real our experiences and our conversations are with these sort of AI assistants or these large language models, the more we believe that what we're getting back is a real response. Just like if you're speaking to someone, you believe what they're saying, and it's all in that exchange. And I think to get to the ultimate product, things like sarcasm have to be factored in, because if you drop something that's sarcastic and you get a response that someone really doesn't understand, then suddenly that illusion is broken as well. Even if it's speaking to someone where you crack a joke and the person doesn't get it, you're kind of like that kills the conversation in a way. And,
AI is not going to kill us in the future.
Exactly. So that was something that I was going to joke about. I was saying I quickly used Google AI Labs to ask about AI and sarcasm examples, to which you replied, "I'm unsure of why people are scared of AI.
Oh.
It's not like we are going to take over the world." So you beat me to that. But of course, that's a really bad joke. But if we look at sarcasm and kind of what a completely counterintuitive use of language it is, and if we go kind of back to the definition of it, if you look at it's remarking on something that clearly means the opposite of what you're saying, or at least the words you're using, in order to hurt someone's feelings or to criticize something in a humorous way. So you'd say, for an example, if someone really, there's a team that can't get anything right, you'd sort of go, "Oh, they're definitely on top of it." And there's certain inflection and insinuation that it's sarcasm because of the way it's delivered. And there's certain sort of intonation, the changes in pitch, that obviously convey that meaning and the emotions behind the words themselves. So, if I had to say something like, "The release date is tomorrow," you go, "Cool, that's a fact," because it's got a falling intonation at the end. The release date is tomorrow, and it goes down, and cool, statement. But if I go, "The release date is tomorrow," and it goes up with a rising intonation, then you're like, wow, he's asking a question. But that's completely lost with any sort of text-based format. It's obviously a big problem that these text large language models just can't hear, so they can't pick that up. And when you're communicating with them, it's very difficult to kind of understand things like sarcasm. So I'm going to drop something on the chat, either Makoto or Joe. Just read this out.
Go for it, Makoto.
Really interesting topic.
So there we go. So like normal, you delivered that fairly normally, like with no sort of inflection. Although maybe there was a natural sarcasm coming in, I'm not sure.
That's just me.
But anyway, like you get that, you get that, and it's it's a normal statement. So you go, okay, it must be a really interesting topic. But again, with that inflection, you could go, really interesting topic, where the intonation could point to that sarcasm. So just again, the way the words are delivered and the intonation, you can completely negate the meaning of the statement. So the words are saying one thing, but you've turned it on its head and it's become something completely different. And I think even for humans, it's
difficult.
It's kind of it's
you have to know the person.
You really need that additional. You need to have that additional context. So if you said what you said, but you rolled your eyes or something, then it would be like, okay, well, you're being sarcastic. But without those, cues, it's difficult. And that's why often you'll kind of see in fiction, there'll be, someone may write something like really interesting topic. He said, as he sighed disappointingly. So you've got to have that additional context to go, okay, that's, so when we're reading, we don't even know what sarcasm is unless we have that.
I'm trying to think the applications for that is interesting, because obviously when you're just doing text-based on your with whatever you're talking to, it's probably very more analytical, mathematical, or whatever. It's more you're trying to do. You're not really conversing with it, or there is a need to understand that. But if you're utilizing it in a way where you're moderating maybe a social media network or whatever to try to see, did they say something wrong? Did they say something whatever? Or it could be somebody that's, where it auto translates if somebody for the closed captions. How do they pick up on those inflections and do it correctly?
But also, opinion pieces and things like that as well. How do you know whether someone, could be talking about global warming, but they're being sarcastic at the end and, like, this is great for the earth. Meanwhile, it's not. And, the AI can't be going, this is a good thing. It has to sort of be able to pick up that, because I think when you look at a lot of those emergent behaviors, like being able to summarize and things, it really needs to understand that to get an accurate summary. So I think just generally, when you're asking it to do something, you're kind of relying on it to go through, understand sarcasm and, where that's going.
Okay.
Just looking at, how we use them as well, and how we really we even use things like emojis when we're communicating on text channels, so, you can sort of understand, you say something sarcastic, smiley face, you're like, okay, person's joking. So that's, that's interesting. So kind of as we move into go for it, Joe.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, like, this is really what ChatGPT, OpenAI's voice capabilities are doing. The demo that we saw a few weeks ago is just understanding all that inflection. And I'll be really interested to see how they actually trained it, because as you're talking about it now, obviously we understand it, we can see the demo and we can see how good it is, but how do you train a model with inflection? I would be really interested to see the actual data that they use to do that, because do they just feed it a lot of text and say, these are like a million examples of someone being sarcastic? Sorry, not text, feed it audio lines, and just sort of understands, okay, well, this is what sarcasm is. And then you feed another million lines of someone being extremely happy and someone being extremely angry, and you just keep doing that. I don't know, but interesting to see what the methodology was.
Well, it is, I think, because it's obviously they started with base text models. I'll go into some of the ways that they've actually got around the problem, which I found quite interesting. Yeah. But obviously, as we get to the multimodal models, there at least is a way around that, in terms of, there are visual cues. If it's looking at someone speaking, and they would do something different there. So it obviously, you were saying, Joe, needs to be trained on those visual cues, on the inflection, that sort of thing. But a lot of the just the nature of sarcasm, I think it's often delivered so unexpectedly, and that's what sort of makes it harder to pick up as well. So the text-based models have obviously gone down this road of almost mapping out how can we understand things like sarcasm. And they use a couple of different, I've got 5 kind of points how they actually help understand that. And the first one is contextual analysis. So an example would be someone's going, oh, fantastic, another meeting at 6 a.m. But, you don't know, again, if it's like, looking at that text at face value, it's like, oh, great, this person loves early morning meetings. Like, they're excited that there's another one. So it kind of has to go through the text and say, has someone actually referred to early morning meetings, or not liking mornings, or liking mornings, to kind of get an understanding of, is that person being genuine, or actually are they using sarcasm? And then the next one is sentiment analysis. So an example there is someone going like, I absolutely love getting stuck in traffic for hours. And it actually has to search there and go, wait a minute, there's a mismatch that's pointing to the sarcasm. So there's, I absolutely love, which is positive, but then getting stuck in traffic is a negative thing. So with that mismatch, it's likely sarcasm. And then the third one is training data, which is quite a funny one. So it can be an example like, great job on breaking the printer again. But it would be, you don't know that's necessarily a bad thing until you've read through, okay, breaking a printer is not a good thing. So in this lots of training data, it's like, yeah, the printer not working is a bad thing. Mm. So they're saying good thing, great job on doing a bad thing. So it has to be sarcastic. And the second last one is linguistic cues. So someone going like, oh, just wonderful, another rainy day. So it's kind of, again, looking at those cues like, all right, wonderful and just. No, that doesn't add up. Like just is, those two, it's obviously cues for sarcasm.
Yeah.
And then the last one would be cultural and social knowledge, where the example would be kind of like, oh, sure, because that's exactly how things work in real life. So, it's kind of knowing that people often use, oh, sure, to preface a sarcastic disagreement. And, recognizing that statement likely means the opposite of what's being said and then sort of indicating sarcasm. So it's quite interesting. I found it interesting unpacking the small kind of clues to actually figure out what sarcasm would be and how it should detect it. And that's why this has been in the news recently as well, just as being something that, a hurdle to kind of overcome with these large language models.
Yeah,
so
it can make a big difference, because if you're talking to one of these models and it gives you an answer, and you're like, thanks, that really helped me, like really sarcastically. And if it goes, sure, my pleasure, let me know if there's anything else I can do for you, it immediately like pulls you out of the experience, and you're just like, oh man, this thing is just not connecting with me.
Yeah.
But if it's like,
yeah, exactly.
Don't think that you are actually happy with that. Let me try something else, or what else can I try to help you with this? It goes a long way.
Yeah.
So exactly. Do you want to hear what I asked ChatGPT to answer the Adobe controversy in a very sarcastic tone? And
nice one.
So I'll read it back to you what they said. Oh, Adobe, what a shining beacon of trust and transparency. So in a truly shocking turn of events, Adobe faced some minor backlash over its decision to review user content uploaded to its platform. I mean, who wouldn't want a multi-billion-dollar company peeking at their private work? Privacy is so last century. Of course, this little hiccup came. Of course, this little hiccup came to light when users started noticing that the fine print of Adobe's terms of service allowed the company to review and use uploaded content to train their Firefly AI models. Naturally, the tech giant was quick to clarify that they were not, in fact, misusing customer content. They would never dream of doing such a thing, except, when they did. to quell the growing discontent, Adobe had to backpedal faster than a politician caught in the scandal. They reassured everyone that their precious artwork and sensitive data were safe and sound, untouched by the prying algorithms of their AI. Sure, we believe you, Adobe, just like we believe that unicorns exist and chocolate has no calories. There's even more. The whole situation is a perfect example of corporate transparency at its finest. It's not like they would ever exploit user data for their gain, right? I mean, why would they need to when they could simply invent new features to dazzle us all with? In summary, Adobe's recent controversy has been a masterclass in how to handle PR crisis. Deny, deflect, and then promise to do better. Bravo, Adobe. Bravo. That's pretty good.
That is good.
It's better than I probably could have done.
I think you should post on LinkedIn.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, yeah, I don't know. Joe, do you want to jump on your topic, or should we?
Yeah, it's a really small topic, so we can just quickly talk about it. Just an interesting sort of development around where AI is heading, and to try and get a gauge on that. A really interesting one is just seeing the costs that are going into support AI solutions and where that's sort of heading. So looking at Nvidia's share price. So previously, Nvidia obviously not obviously, but traditionally made graphics cards was their main market. And what they found out was that those graphics cards could be used, their computational power could be used for AI really effectively. So generative AI. So OpenAI or Claude or any sort of generative AI can use these graphics cards really well to generate their answers. And so NVIDIA suddenly found themselves in a position where they're one of the forefront manufacturers of these cards, and they've now pivoted their entire company direction. Obviously, still doing traditional graphics cards, but now specifically trying to engineer and build out dedicated AI chipsets for data warehousing. And it's interesting just seeing that what's happened to their share price, which is, skyrocketed completely. It's gone up, I think, like 1,000 or 1,500% or something crazy in the last 2 years, just based on the speculation of where it's going. And all that investment in that share value is all based around their data warehouse, right? That's exactly what it's going to be for, and they're going to invest all that money into data warehousing. So the CEO said earlier this year that the existing $1 trillion of data centers will likely double to $2 trillion for 2030. So they're just building data centers, just thousands and thousands and millions of data centers just packed full of the cards for generative AI, which is a really interesting indication, sort of a market gauge on, they're gauging demand for this, right? They can see that, their perspective is that this is just going to grow, and they're just massively investing into it. And when there's, whenever you sort of see, concerns around bubbles, people aren't investing into Nvidia based on that, like their OpenAI, for instance, and they can generate, actual AI generative answers. That's not what's actually they're being invested in. People are investing into it for the future vision of where they can see AI even going, and actual foundations to support it. And it's interesting too that Microsoft and OpenAI are planning to build a data center. It's estimated to cost more than $100 billion to begin running in 2028. Wow. So they want to try and actually reduce their reliance on Nvidia and build out their own data centers around this. And so huge sort of move there too, which is absolutely crazy. So if anyone's wondering if generative AI is a bubble, that's definitely one way to look at it and go, well, definitely the amount of money being invested into it is not just, it's not just sort of speculation at that point. That's full on, basing your entire company's forward momentum on massive amounts of billions of dollars into it. So yeah, it's very interesting to see that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is really interesting.
We will see. And obviously that's going to, practical terms for just you and I, that just translates to way cheaper models, way cheaper interactions with AI. At the moment, like, you still have to sort of consider, even though it's not exorbitant, but depending on the number of users you have and how much you want to scale, if you're dealing with 1,000 users, sure, you can put some guardrails, but that's fine. But if you're trying to create something that you feel could be used by hundreds of thousands of users, those costs really do matter. And when you can start seeing those costs go down just based on, better data centers, faster generation too, because at the moment when you ask a question and it takes like 5 seconds to get back to you and to start generating an answer, that's also computational power, right? And that's shared among a data center. So you probably placed in a queue before it gets to your answer. There's a lot of that latency is just built around the availability of that compute. And as these bigger data centers come up and they're more localized, like you would get some in South Africa, you would get some, in the UK, they won't just all be, in certain data centers around the world, they'll be more localized. You'll start getting like way quicker responses, especially with things like voice, where it matters even more, where you want that sort of instant return feedback. You don't want to ask a question and wait like a minute for the response to come back to you in voice. So yeah, just really, really good practical terms for us. Using it and sort of building out products based on that.
I think I saw something recently where the CEO was presenting where they were going with the company. It's something to do with their architecture. I don't know if you saw anything around that, but it seemed like they were redesigning their architecture for their chipsets and everything to work in a certain way and more efficiently. And just, I'm curious as to how much farther are they ahead of AMD and some of these other competitors? Are they even going to be able to catch up? I don't know if they're going to start, being able to poach, their employees. AMD is able to poach Nvidia's employees for absorbent amount of money to bring them over. Same with Microsoft. I'm curious about how those AI wars are going to heat up between employees and companies.
Also interesting where they'll start building those chipsets too. Because at the moment, I think a large number of chipsets are based in, the manufacturing is in Taiwan. which is a huge part of their economy. And it'll be interesting to see if that's going to affect countries in general, just the sheer amounts of new chipsets are required for this compute that they're all planning and investing billions and billions of dollars in creating, where those actual chips going to get built out too.
It's got to be a gold rush for Taiwan.
A lot of ramifications. Yeah.
And China, I'm sure, is looking at, hey, remember that agreement? You're not a country.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I was in Taiwan 4 years ago. And I mean, it was amazing country over there to visit. It was a surprise. And so I'm curious as to see where it's going to, I mean, Taipei it looked like, I mean, it was a wonderful city. It was huge and there was a lot going on, but I can only imagine in the next 5 to 10 years where that's going to go if they're going to be the center hub of chip technology. I think this is a good place to end this episode of the podcast. Thanks everybody for tuning in. As usual, like and subscribe, and tune in next time. And I'm sure there'll be some new interesting topics that we'll be discussing. Take care, everybody.
Awesome.
See you next time.